Hello. This is something I've wanted to do for a while. I kind of want to talk a little bit about my live set and how it works, how it bridges into Ableton, and the kind of philosophy and mindset of creating a live set with Touchdesigner this way and what that means in terms of a performance on stage. The first thing you'll kind of notice is that there's nothing actually happening in Touch right now. Everything is paused and we got some errors. So this is probably the setup you'll have seen me share on my socials, and this is what I would use live. And the reason it's set up this way is because when I'm actually playing live, I have Touch over on the right like this, and I have Ableton over on the left like this, and I can see my visuals kind of live in this window here. And this is, I mean, it doesn't look great right now because it's paused, but this is essentially what is sent over to the projector, and I can see everything kind of bunched up together real nice. Let's tidy this up just a bit. And you know, I can get in, and if anything weird happens, I can change parameters and whatever on the fly. So this is exactly what I'd see on my screen in a live setting. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to close this, and I have this. So this is the exact same set. I have just laid things out in a more linear fashion, so the signal flow is a little bit more easy to follow as I go through this. But in terms of functionality, it is the exact same, and we can see this one is actually doing something. The big thing with the philosophy of this set is it's very difficult to achieve the same effect twice on a conscious level. I think if you're trying to say you kind of get your set here and you're like, whoa, that looks cool, that will look good in about 10 minutes at a particular drop, the chances of you having all of the same settings when you're doing this live in all of the same places is nil. And the first time I started to use this, I was trying to remember, hey, this configuration here looks cool, let's try and memorize that, and that just like doesn't work at all. So it kind of it works better if you just play it with the music and let things happen on a more kind of chaotic level. And it's almost like, rather than you controlling the visual system, it's almost like the visual system is doing its own thing, and you're just kind of like tethering it a little bit and reining it in when things get too crazy. So yeah, it's not a visual setup in the sense that I would want to ever say, hey, this looks cool right now, let's get back here again in 20 minutes, because that just doesn't work. So yeah, before I start, I just want to say the support and interest I've had in this has been phenomenal. It's been really humbling. I'm really appreciative of that. And if you want to follow any of my accounts, grab my music, check out my collective, glitch.cool. I have a Patreon. I sell stuff on Bandcamp. I also teach privately. You can send me an email if you're interested in diving more deeply into these systems in terms of music and visuals. So yeah, all of that is just super appreciated. So cool. Let's get into this. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the philosophy of this set and this kind of setup and why I've chosen to do things this way. So if you look at Ableton, like all I'm doing in my live performances is playing my tracks left to right, and I'm essentially just playing MP3s. And while that can seem a bit cheap, the reason for that at the moment is that I haven't really found a good performative way to treat this music in a live setting. It's such a produced genre, like it's very painted during its kind of creative process, that the end result doesn't leave room for much live performance in a way that I have found does the music justice at the same time. So other than playing your actual tracks just as WAVs like this, you can also get super performative and just have a controller where you can just smash stuff and try and do some live jams and things. But those kind of approaches are totally opposite ends of the spectrum, and while in the same set they can bring a sense of balance, I still haven't really found a happy medium that can be a bit more used along the entire length of a performance, I guess. So there are some ongoing discussions about this problem in the glitch.cool Discord and in Wool's Patreon Discord. So yeah, if you have anything to add to those, please jump in there and get involved, because I mean it's probably something that's never going to be technically really solved, but yeah, always interested in hearing new ideas about how people approach performing this kind of music live. So musically, that's pretty much it. It's really that simple, and the way I'm bridging Ableton into Touchdesigner is through this device. It's a Max device called Live Grabber, and you can see it's picking up my signals here. They're band split into low, mids and highs, and I don't think I've really changed an awful lot from the default settings here. And that sends these signals over OSC into Touch, and they can come up over here in this node. So you see I've got my band split audio signals, and the nice thing about this is it also has these triggers, which are basically just like a switch that turns on and off at an arbitrary threshold, and that can be really nice for more stroby, quick transitions and things like that. So I don't really want to go too deeply into Live Grabber because I think that would take too long for this video, and also Claude has a fantastic video where he describes how to set this up and much more detail about how all of this works, and there's many more kind of parts to this device as well, which I haven't even used in this live set. Like, for example, you can send MIDI over as well, which you might have noticed on the receiving end here. I had some MIDI notes, but for this set I'm not using these. I will talk a little bit more about how this works at the end of the video. I can use like an older set as an example. Yes, we have our nice signals coming into Touch here, and kind of want to maybe just do a quick overview of what is happening in Touch. So I have my signals coming in from the audio here, and they're just there's a little bit of math here that just kind of normalizes those into a nice smooth like 0 to 1 value. Probably not as important using Live Grabber because it kind of already does that work on the input level. And this was taken from a system where I had like an audio file coming directly into Touchdesigner here. So yeah, I think this section was taken from an Electronaut tutorial. So I haven't been able to find it. So if anyone knows which one I'm talking about, if it even is him, please let me know so I can put a link in the description. The only thing I've added to this is this limit, which basically fixes a bug where sometimes the signals would go from 0 to 1 even at complete silence, which obviously you don't want. So this limit just kind of fixes that. And again, I don't want to go too deep into the maths here. I think that would warrant its own video and would just drag this one out a lot more than is necessary. So yeah, that's the audio signal right here, all of this. And this up here is just my resolution. I have it set to 1080 for live stuff. And over here, this is where my controller here, you can see in the top left, kind of comes in. So as I move knobs, you'll see some of the values change. And because they're MIDI, they go from 0 to 127. And I'm just normalizing those values here from 0 to 1 because that's a nicer range to work with when you're bringing them over into your post-processing. And over here, I'm changing that 0 to 1 to I think minus 180 to plus 180 because I was doing some stuff with like rotations at one point, and I don't think I'm even using that in this set. And then this section here for the controller is basically just if you look at the top left here, when I switch something on, it means that the light on the controller comes on. So on stage I can kind of see out of fly which effects I've switched on and off. These buttons basically just are assigned to these switches at the end of every post-processing group. So you'll see, let me actually find this one. Yeah, so as I turn this on, you'll see it just switches from 0 to 1. So it just skips this section or runs the signal through it. So that's pretty much that. The brains of the visual operation is the particlesGPU system, and if I open the parameters here, you'll see I have a lot of fairly like randomly assigned values coming from the controller and from audio signals, and some of them are both and they're multiplied against each other. The process by which I chose which signals and which buttons and sliders and knobs and stuff go to which parameters was trial and error and fairly random. And I think that's what's kind of nice about this setup, is that this is very custom. And if you were to build your own setup, even with the exact same nodes, if I just stripped out all of the signal links or the controller links, I don't know what you call these references, if I gave you the exact same project, you would build something completely different. So it's very custom, it's very bespoke, and when you start to build your own one and figure out what works good and what doesn't work and what's handy to play and control live and what parts of the audio signal react well with the visuals, it becomes very nice to perform. It gets very performative, and it's kind of like solved the problem of what am I going to do with this kind of music live, and this kind of gave me something to do. It's kind of why I got into visuals in the first place, is just so I wasn't standing still on stage like an idiot just playing MP3s. So yeah, particlesGPU is the guts of the operation. I don't use any video files currently. It's something I want to kind of look into, but yeah, that's pretty much it. And everything else after this point is post-processing. So to go a little bit deeper into the post-processing, each one of these colored boxes is a particular effect. The first one is just a mirror, which makes the image like kind of symmetrical. The second one, oh yeah, the second one is this kind of noise background, which kind of looks cool but isn't as audio reactive as I would like. I think this is going to take a little bit more tweaking on the kind of the design stage. It's cool, and you know, if you bring in like tons of other effects, it can look really nice. But I mean, it doesn't look, it still looks awful. But yeah, it's not exactly where I'd want it. I've ended up really not using this in live settings too much. It can look cool at like slower parts, but yeah, it just doesn't react well enough to the audio just yet. The next three boxes are basically the first three switches on the controller here. So if I just turn them all on, you'll see loads of cool glitchy effects. These are all just pretty rudimentary feedback loops with different like transforms and levels, and you can switch them all on and off. One thing I do want to jump to the end of the signal to talk about is, I believe, where is it? This, oh yeah, this section here. So this just makes everything go red. This is just this little thing here. Puts a red layer in, which looks really, really, really nice. And yeah, when you bring in effects and stuff, that looks cool, right? So yeah, let's go back to where we were. Over here, this is still these feedback loops. Here we have a audio reactive strobe effect. So if this is switched on, I'm not actually touching anything on the controller right now, but we get this kind of nice strobe. I think the low end of the signal is what's triggering this. And I've got a manual strobe as well, so when I hold this button, we get that really nice, like, kind of much faster sort of strobe. There's an edge feedback loop, which is a really nice, like, full textural kind of thing. And this one is on a blend rather than just a switch, so you can kind of slowly bring it in. And let's make the circle a bit smaller, put it back to a 2D circle, maybe bring in some red. Yeah, that looks pretty nice, so that's cool. And the next bit of post-processing is it's a pixel sorting effect and a couple of feedback loops that I've called bubblegum, because I originally made this to do some promo for Wulg's Bubblegum album that came out a couple of years ago. And if I switch that on, so at the moment let's turn this edge all the way off. So the bubblegum one is pretty nuts. There's a lot of color. It's quite intense. So again, this one is on like a blend rather than just like a switch. And if we turn like the feedback loops on at the same time, stuff starts to get pretty nuts. So that's good for like big moments, and I can also change it to black and white. Just turn the red off, and you can turn the color back on as well. So yeah, that basically covers the bubblegum section, and you know, it looks really cool with the strobe. We can invert it. It's way too bright, whatever. Over here, what do we have? What is this? This is a noise filter, which basically just like overlays some noise over the entire image. And I can control the exponent of the noise as well, which can kind of give some cool, like, electric kind of effects when you get it right. Control the period and the harmonics, like that looks pretty neat. Yeah, so that's nice. It's simple, it's subtle. Yeah, we can turn this like all the way up. It doesn't look so good. Cool, so that's this little section. That's literally just a noise overlay. And what have we got here? We've got the strobe system on a button I've showed you before. We've got the invert, I've showed you that. This is the red color layer. And then we have some, yeah, so I have an image overlay, which I can bring in. So you can just change the image here. This was for the show that I used this for back in May. And some rudimentary kind of post-processing to make sure levels don't get too crazy and, you know, size constraints are all the same. I also have like a text input, which I've got mapped to a knob here, so I can like bring in some different words, can type whatever. If there's different people playing on the stage, I can change this, whatever. I tend to not use this. I think it looks a little bit goofy. Haven't got it to look super cool yet. Yeah, whatever. And that's pretty much it. Then everything just gets sent out to this window, and that goes to the projector. So that's the gist of how this live set works. So the one thing I didn't talk about is the MIDI note section. So I've opened up an older version of this set, and you'll see at the top I have a load of little MIDI notes. This note grabber is a live grabber module, I guess, and that just sends MIDI data to Touch. So if I play this section where there's no MIDI values, there's also no audio, you'll see like none of the actual MIDI notes are switched on, right? But if I play the section over here where there's 3 of them, oh, let me turn the audio on this set down a bit. Boop, boop. There we go. So you'll see now none of them have turned on, so I don't know what's happening there. This should work. Basically, the idea is that I can switch MIDI notes on. Oh, maybe it was because it was cropped beforehand. Oh yeah, there we go. So D, C sharp, and D sharp have switched on now. So you can basically assign those values to the switches that I was controlling live. So you can say, you know, at this point in the song, this is going to change to 1, and we can turn on the switch here for the mirror. So at this point in the set, everything gets mirrored. So it's kind of like a nice balance, or a nice way to approach like automating your visuals as well. So if you got so many controls here that, you know, you don't know what to do with them, it's a nice safety net of saying, hey, at this point in the set, I'm always going to have the 3 effects that are correlating to these 3 MIDI notes switch on at this point. And then it means you can kind of both build complexity, because it gives you less to worry about manually, and you can assign your kind of brain power and hand power elsewhere, to like having more space with the knobs and the faders and buttons and stuff. And it also gives you a nice safety net that you can say, you know, at this point things will always do this, which is nice as well. So I've kind of stopped using this as much because I like the performative aspect of just having the switches and buttons and stuff. But yeah, depends on the performance, depends on the set, so that's always nice too. So that is basically everything I believe I have gone over. Pretty much everything I can think of. I mean, what I can do here is just maybe have a little jam and talk over it as I'm doing it. So sometimes, you know, I might get things into a state where this happens and it doesn't look very good, but you just start to pull stuff back, and when you kind of get a feel for what your parameters on a setup like this are doing, you'll kind of have a good idea of where the problem kind of areas can be, and what's the most likely place that an issue may be occurring. Yeah, because it's quite easy to just get things like too crazy with this. It's taken a bit of tweaking on all of the values and everything in the post-processing to make sure it's harder and harder for stuff to just say get into like some crazy feedback loop and blow out to white or whatever, or like you end up like a totally black or white screen. But yeah, that's kind of the idea behind all of this. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't mention is here on the master I just have like a fade at the very end of all of the signals, so I can just, that's the nuclear option, and that's just for opening and closing a set. Just you can fade stuff in and out to a black screen. So maybe let me grab a track that will react nicely, and I can maybe do a little jam, see how things go. So yeah, that is the gist of how the live set works. I hope that's been really helpful, and again, it's been more of an overview rather than a deep dive into any of the individual components of the set. So if you've got any questions, please give me a shout. Best way to get me is Discord or email. I'm pretty slow at responding to social media messages. I don't check those as often as I should. I also offer lessons, so if you want to book some time in and do a deep dive into anything related to Touchdesigner or this particular set or music production, please hit me up. And yeah, I hope this has been helpful. So thank you.